Good morning, everyone. This is Nathan Lindorf with The Rational Independent. It's a somber morning as we face another mass shooting in Texas, and I've decided, given the evolving nature of information, as well as where I am in my heart today, that I'm going to let this issue breathe for a couple of days before I address it. It's easy to make snap judgments. It's hard to wait for facts. It's hard to make a measured response, a measured analysis, instead of a knee-jerk primal scream. We're going to cover one of the other topics on r/politics that is important and it is timely. It's just a little less weighty. 43 Senate Republicans vow to oppose debt ceiling increase without spending cuts. This is from CNN, posted today, and actually posted over the weekend. All but 6 Senate Republicans on Saturday vowed to oppose raising the debt ceiling without substantive spending and budget reforms, backing up the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. So good for them for actually working together. Almost looks like the Republicans are trying to have their act together. It should be pointed, just for the record, a couple of these are no surprises. A couple of these are. Senator Collins, Murkowski, and Romney are all Republican senators who all did not sign this same letter saying we're not going to do this. But also, Senator Rand Paul, Josh Hawley, and John Kennedy didn't sign this vow. Now, I expect for different ideological and philosophical reasons, I doubt these 6 senators all had the same reasoning. But suffice it to say, most of the GOP caucus in the Senate is pushing back on a debt ceiling increase. We'll get to that in a second. So this is a bit of a timely issue. Apparently, we could begin defaulting on our debt starting on June 1st if Congress doesn't act. So the letter ends by saying, we will not be voting for cloture on any bill that raises the debt ceiling without substantive spending and budget reforms. So as we dig into the analysis portion, let's take the time to define a couple of terms. The U.S. Senate has a few archaic terms and processes that are used in reporting, that are used when reporting on the Senate, even though the average person probably doesn't understand the ins and outs. The process is a little clunky. First, let's talk cloture, because that's fun. The Senate is meant to be a deliberative body that has a higher threshold for legislation to pass. For most things in the House of Representatives, you need a bare majority. For some things like convicting after for some things like impeachment, it requires, say, a 2/3 vote or a 3/4 vote. Things like passing new constitutional amendments. But for most legislative processes, you just need a bare majority, which is fine. That allows the House of Representatives to be very responsive to the will of the people. More people, but in the Senate, after something passes the House, if it goes to the Senate, in order to get it past the Senate, it has to go through a series of steps. To keep it brief, every bill needs to be, if it originates in the Senate, there's a subcommittee piece, but if it, in this example, comes from the House of Representatives, it needs to be deliberated within the body of the Senate. And then there needs to be a vote to close deliberations. It's not a vote to pass. This is where it's a little wrinkly. It's not a vote to pass the legislation. It's a vote to end deliberation on whatever's being debated. So it's saying we've debated it enough. Let's put it up for a vote. That process of ending deliberation is called cloture. So the House passes a bill that raises the debt limit. It goes to the Senate. If the Senate passes it, it goes to the President. Joe Biden signs it. President Biden signs it. And the debt limit is raised. And everyone kicks the can down the road and we're all happy. In order to do that, after the House passes it, it goes to the Senate. After the Senate has it, they deliberate, same as everybody else. Once they're done deliberating, they vote on cloture, which closes deliberation, after which it's then passed and then moves on to the President's desk for a signature. So here's why that's important. Some deliberations require a 60-vote majority they require a 60-vote threshold to pass a cloture vote. So it used to be that federal judiciary nominees required 60 votes. And because of that, if you didn't have not just a bare majority, but a solid majority, or more importantly, let's say you had 55 Republicans and you want to pass you want to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court, you need to put forward someone who is appealing enough to the other side that you can pull over 5 or 6 or 7, 10 Democratic votes to get over your 60 vote threshold. If it's a party line vote and you only have 55, you're not going to be able to pass that nominee. Now, when it comes to cloture, in the last few decades, we've actually seen a bit of a shift on this issue, because what's happened is cloture is determined by Senate rules, Senate process. Like I said, it's a little archaic. It's a set of rules that everyone agrees to follow. And like I said, it used to be different. However, over time, rules can change. It's a deliberative body. It's allowed to adopt new rules, vote on them, pass them, and then we move ahead. For a brief period of time under President Obama, the Democrats had a supermajority, meaning that they had 60 votes, I think 61, somewhere in there, of all Democrats in the Senate. In other words, it was filibuster proof. They could pass anything they wanted in the Senate with a straight party line vote. They didn't need any Republicans involved, and they could follow the rules and make whatever changes they wanted. At some point, this is when Obamacare passed, primarily. But some point in this tenure, I forget the exact timing, Harry Reid, Senator Reid, who was the Senate Majority Leader for the Democrats at the time, proposed and got passed a change in the rules that said for federal judiciary nominations, we don't need a cloture vote. We don't need a 60 vote threshold. And he changed that, and they were able to push through a bunch of judicial nominations that were friendly to President Obama's agenda. And because of that, a lot of people got cranky. Mitch McConnell said, that's your right. You're in the majority right now, but you will live to regret this. And sure enough, who replaces President Obama? But President Trump. Guess what President Trump enjoys for part of his term? A Senate majority. Well, now we don't need 60 votes. The Republicans didn't get 60 senators. So they had a small majority, but not enough to pass a filibuster. Also, in that time, we had 3 Supreme Court vacancies, which means that President Trump, in 4 years, replaced 3 members of the Supreme Court. And he was able to get those nominations through the Senate with a bare majority of votes. He didn't need 60 votes, which meant he had much more control over who he put on the bench. In other words, cloture cuts both ways. And it's important to recognize that when you're looking at fair governance. We've talked about it before, but the shoe always ends up on the other foot. So if you're not comfortable with the other side having this particular power, be careful whether or not you choose to give it to your side. Because eventually, we're going to flip around. It's just the nature of politics in general. Anyway, back to this topic. Apparently, according to the rules, a vote to raise the debt limit requires a 60 vote threshold still. Now, who knows when they're going to change that? Given the nature of the beast, wouldn't surprise me if they wanted to change that. But ironically, in order to change whether or not something requires 60 votes, I think you need 60 votes. So even though the Democrats have a slim majority in the Senate, they can't use that majority to say, just kidding, we no longer need 60 votes, now we need 51 votes for raising the debt limit. Because of that, that means that the Democrats need 60 votes, which means they need 10 Republicans. They need 10 Republicans to cross the aisle and support this debt limit. Now, it sounds like from the signaling and posturing in this article that they have 6, so they need 3 or 4 more. But it looks like all the rest of the congressional bloc on the Republican Senate side is standing together and saying, we're not going to do it. So that's the Senate procedural piece. Now that we got that covered, let's talk a little bit about debt limits and fiscal responsibility. It is all too easy to look out at the world and to say, there's the bad guys. They're all stupid dumbheads and we shouldn't even pay attention to them. They're the other side, the other team, they're the ones we should root against. And there's a lot of that kind of team sport mentality in modern politics, and it's not unique to modern politics. It happens quite a bit once you get strong partisan division in a country. So this is Republican versus Democrat. This is red versus blue. When I get comments on my videos, pretty consistently, I'll get comments that are clearly from this partisan view, and they'll say things like, all Republicans, blah, blah, blah. All Democrats, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really matter what they say after that, because what they're saying is, I'm framing the world as good guys versus bad guys, and my team are the good guys. That makes the other team the bad guys, and everyone else is irrelevant. I don't have a lot of patience for that. I am registered as a political independent. I don't anticipate joining a party anytime soon. while I do agree with some of the principles espoused by the Republican Party, generally they lack strategic vision. And I think we're ending up in a situation where because of that, they fail to effectively govern. If we look at President Trump, let's take this situation as a perfect example. Here we have the Republicans saying, we're going to take a stand on fiscal responsibility. We're not going to raise the debt limit without structural changes to the budget. Except when Trump was president, the Republican Party spent money like it was water, spent it like a drunken sailor at an orgy. There was no restraint. There was no talk of addressing entitlement reform, no talk of restructuring debt, no talk of restricting expenditures, etc., because they were getting their way. And so they were more than happy to spend the money. Now the other team wants to spend the money, and suddenly you find your principle? Sorry, I don't think that's going to work very well. I hope they manage to succeed in getting some sort of concession along with raising the debt limit. I don't seriously believe that they're going to actually not raise the debt. I think they're going to cave, and they're going to give the government machine what it wants, which is more money. That's always what it wants. More money, more money, more money, because they don't have principles sufficient to oppose that government machine. They are too much a part of the machine. An actual talk about the structure of the U.S. budget, such as it is, and debt and federal spending is a very important topic and entirely outside the scope of something we can tackle today. I'll look for an article to pop up that addresses it, and we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive at that time. But the short version is, of all of this, if you want to boil it down to my 2 cents, Republicans love spending money when their guy was in charge. Now that their guy is not in charge, they want to win some points with their base by looking like they're financially responsible. The Democrats want to win points in their base by making the Republicans look evil and heartless. Both parties are using this kind of brinkmanship contest to further their own partisan political agenda. It's unseemly, and it's not going to fundamentally change anything. Pro or con, for or against. This will stumble its way forward to something approaching the status quo until it doesn't. And the longer you kick the can down the road, the longer you defer reconciling your financial adventurism with reality, the more expensive the bill that comes due. I don't see a way around that as an economic reality. So for myself and my family, we have food storage, we have access to water, we live in a place we stay close to our church, we're not preppers by any means. We stay engaged in the community around us. We look for ways to try and improve the lives of the people around us. But my wife and I, honestly, just being transparent, ever since TARP, for those of you who are young, go look it up. Ever since TARP, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, the Congress is never going to address this until it's forced to be addressed. And that means they're going to keep kicking the can down the road and down the road and down the road, no matter who's in charge, until they can't. And when they can't, it is going to hit like a truck. The storm is coming, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger the longer we put off this reckoning. I'm not a prophet. I have no idea when that reckoning is going to come. But I don't see any other path forward that doesn't include that kind of harsh economic reconciliation between the lies we've told ourselves and the reality. And when that happens, it's going to be painful. When that happens, it's going to be catastrophic to the economy. If we're lucky, we have a generation of lost economic output and we retain our freedom. If we're lucky. I don't think we're that lucky, and I don't think we're that moral. I think when the pain comes, when the pressure comes, those who are in charge and most citizens who have gotten so fat and lazy and complacent are going to continue to make the choice that seems the most comfortable, or the choice that will allow them to resume their personal comforts as quickly as possible. And that choice will lead us to tyranny. And if America falls to tyranny, then the world is screwed. So I know that's a bit of a bleak outlook. Please feel free to argue me out of my bleakness. Show me where I'm wrong. I don't think I am. That's my Reddit rant for today. Good luck out there.